Hey, I'm Jan Ozer from the Streaming Learning Center. We're here today with Tim Siglin and Michelle Forsiglin from the Streaming Media Magazine and the Help Me Stream Research Foundation, who just released the State of Streaming Spring 2021 report, which was sponsored by Harmonic and Streaming Media Magazine. According to an article in Streaming Media Magazine, the report revealed radical changes to the streaming industry over the last 12 months. We're here to discuss those changes with the authors, Tim and Michelle. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Jan.
My pleasure. So as an overview, tell us about the survey and what it's designed to do.
Sure. So we had roughly 450 people take this survey. And just to go back to I guess it was last year, right around the time we got married, we did the first streaming media state of streaming survey. We thought it was going to be an annual thing, but things changed so quickly in the industry.
I was going to say, and with the pandemic,
that we decided to actually start putting one out every 6 months, or Eric decided to start putting one out every 6 months. And we sort of thought with this one, okay, we'll get more of the same, but it was interesting. There were some fairly significant changes in the last 6 months.
Okay, so as background, who takes this? What kind of companies are participating in this?
So do you want to take that one, or do you want me to?
You go ahead.
Okay.
I'll add to.
Okay, got it. So let's see. It goes out to the streaming media mailing list, the streammedia.com's mailing list, which are fairly robust. They're fairly tech heavy as well. So one of the things we have to be careful of when we sort of analyze things, especially for what Michelle does in analysis, is to make sure that it's not skewed just to technology vendors or systems integrators or VARs. But as it turns out on this particular one, I think one of the findings we had is that we got a good across the board group of respondents, everything from religious organizations to secondary education.
I was going to say schools and secondary.
And even visual artists and like that. Yeah. So while we don't set out to get any particular industry, it turns out we get representation from about 30 different industries in the report.
Okay. So one of the radical changes was very large streaming increases in religious organizations, schools, and artists. And I guess that makes sense given the fact that everybody was locked up. Did you make any observations about just businesses in general, how they were using video?
So to your point on sort of the rise in those groups that would be considered non-traditional to use streaming, yeah, those were significant. From a general business standpoint, we've done a survey that focuses on enterprise video streaming, which the report will be coming out in a couple weeks. But what we found, at least in this report, was that we had consistency across the last couple versions of the report with groups like sort of standard enterprise general business, as well as groups in the traditional broadcast space. You mentioned, like I said, those 3 jumps, and Michelle, you might want to just touch on those briefly.
Yeah, the religious organizations had actually a 50% increase. So with everything being locked down, and you said it was, with that didn't really have a choice but to kind of go either streaming or just not have, some type of service. So they definitely relied heavily during that time on streaming. Education had a 25% growth. So I think some had already been pushing toward that kind of idea of, when people were out or whatnot, to have something to fall back on. But again, with the pandemic and the lockdown, it really jumped up significantly as well.
And I would add, this 25% jump isn't a 25% jump from pre-pandemic. This is a 25% jump from the middle of the pandemic. Yeah. So schools, it appears, and religious organizations are continuing to see an increase in the amount of video they're doing rather than a decrease as we come out of the lockdowns. And the same, just to pitch that enterprise video survey, the same is also true in that we're seeing general business saying, look, we're going to probably do fewer in-person meetings even as the lockdowns lift. We're going to continue to use video, and that's both heartening and scary for both, for both what we do and what you do, and the fact that means business is going to stay busy for quite a bit longer than we sort of expected.
And let me go ahead and add the artists, which considered or consisted of both music, visual, and media, grew 100%. So pretty well.
And I think that's going to also continue, where you're going to have people who aren't comfortable going to concerts, whether they've been vaccinated or not. They may just not feel comfortable going into a crowd. And so these hybrid models of doing concerts that are broadcast and you pay the pay-per-view price versus going and actually seeing it in a venue. While we thought at the beginning of the pandemic everybody would be happy to run back to concerts, I think a year and a half into it, people are like, yeah, maybe I'll wait for a little while longer. So
it depends on your age, I think. If
and going to see as well.
Very good.
2 years ago, we wouldn't have lumped in GoToWebinar and Zoom with traditional live streaming, and it really feels like we're doing that now. What's your sense of the breakout on that?
It's hard to say straight up how much of what we consider live streaming is what I would consider interactive or bidirectional. I came out of video conferencing before this, and so for me, it's weird to see video conferencing suddenly invade the streaming space. So it's hard to say how much of live is this interactive piece, but I will say for certain, live has risen to where there's now, at least during the pandemic, been a lot more live generated than on-demand content. The one, go ahead.
No, that was one of your radical findings, was that the companies who did both live and VOD actually jumped up to the level of just VOD only last time. I think it was.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing there is sort of a combination of hybrid models again, where you may have an interactive thing like we're doing here. You may have 10 people interacting, but you may have 50,000 people or 10,000 people, say, watching it as a stream. So is that live streaming or is that interactive streaming? It's sort of both combined together. For those of us who need to interact, the interactive piece has risen. For those who just want to watch the interaction, that has risen as well.
Okay, so what does this mean for the average worker in the streaming industry? What skills do they need to enhance to succeed over the next 3 or 4 years?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I think one of the things that they really need to think about is, let me couch it in terms of platforms, because we see the industry sort of become platform centric, whether it's Bright Coves or even an Akamai at a high level in a CDN. I think one of the things that those companies really need to think about, and the workers within them, is how much of what we're doing is live will morph over into interactive, because interactive is really hard to deliver compared to even live HLS. I mean, you can't do HLS for the kind of discussion we're having here. Even low latency HLS really won't play well into it. So skill sets for me, I'd say, if you think your company's moving more toward interactive, learn WebRTC at a fundamental level, and then learn some of the codecs that sort of fit into WebRTC. In terms of pure on-demand consumption, the very traditional sort of Netflix, Disney Plus, etc. I think one of the things that we've seen as we've done interviews, both with the Content Delivery Summit and Streaming Media Connect, is performance. Companies are having to scale much more rapidly than they expected. And as a result, performance has become a huge, huge issue. So Disney did a fireside chat interview with myself and Eric, and what they said was, look, we went into Latin America earlier than we expected, not knowing what to expect, and we had to learn from the ground up that it was different from North America. So that's, I think, another skill set, is making sure that people understand different geographies will require different approaches in the way that content is delivered. And if you can become an expert in Malaysian delivery, you might actually have a really good, job security versus if you're one of 2,000 who know how to deliver in North America, if that makes sense.
Did you get a sense of the increase in viewing, pure viewing? Because it seems like you were more targeted towards producers and the people who created the tools that help producers. But what did you see on the viewing side? Does that continue to go up, or is that kind of static at this point?
What we saw from respondents here is that they do seem to be consuming more. So one of the hard things in a survey like this is you're asking people in the industry, whether they're a visual artist who's had to learn streaming to make money, or somebody who works for Bitmovin or a technology company. You're asking them as a professional to tell us what you're doing. But one of the questions that we asked, and this came out as one of our radicals as well, was around, do you distribute content or do you create content, or do you do both? My assumption, and this is just clearly an assumption, is people who create also tend to consume more. And so if we're seeing a rise in content creators, we're probably also seeing a consistent rise in content consumption. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you want to touch quickly on what the differences were in this one.
So when we had asked about the creating or distributing or both, from the last time that we had done it, it was around about 46%, and it went up to 66%. So that was quite yeah, it was a big jump.
And I think what we found during the pandemic is people weren't just content creating their content. They wanted to make sure that it got out there to the general consumer. Now, is that distributing, putting it on YouTube? Yes, it could be. I mean, that clearly is a really easy way to do that.
That and Facebook Live.
Facebook Live, Twitter. Yeah. But I think given the type of respondents that we had, it appears that a number of these are also doing white label solutions. So we can go back and, while we can't see detailed information about the people, we can see the IP addresses. So we can look at the IP address and go, oh, well, that person works for this university, or that person works for this particular business. And then you can go look and you can see that they're doing a lot more streaming on their website. Yeah. So, that I think has become a big shift in the industry in the last couple, I would say maybe the last 12 months, but certainly in the last 6 months.
Yeah, because from the creation side, it went from 19 to 12, and the distribution side, it dropped. And it also dropped on the distribution from 20 to 13. So
we're seeing people who create content and want to get it out there to an audience,
and distribution as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So we all missed buying Zoom early, I guess, or I did anyway. So what do you see as the next big opportunities technology-wise? What technologies are going to be brought to the fore or continue to grow at an exponential rate because of what you're seeing on the production side?
Well, and again, I'm going to sort of pitch to the enterprise video survey that you're going to put a link to, and the report will come out next week. I think what was interesting was everybody used Zoom, but not everybody likes Zoom. A lot of people use GoToMeeting. A lot of people use Google Meet, Teams. Everybody seemed frustrated with the features. Those, like, if you could combine all of them together, you'd have a really good platform.
Yeah.
To me personally, I think the interactive technologies will continue to grow to where they're more immersive if we can get to that level. But I think fundamentally the other thing, and this was really fascinating in the enterprise report, was the lack of mobile devices that that people were using to consume. So we asked a question in that one that said, tell us how you consume personally. And half of the people were like smartphones, tablets, smart TVs, gaming consoles, OTT platforms.
It was so evenly distributed.
It was. And then when you looked at how do you do it in enterprise, desktop and laptop were 75% of it. No, 10% smartphone, nothing on any of the other things from smart TVs to gaming consoles, etc. So it's very clear that there's this disconnect in the enterprise space versus the general consumer space in terms of the number of devices that people consume content on. And I think that if I were going to invest in an enterprise video player, it would be one that would allow you to just as easily roll from watching it on your smartphone to your smart TV to your desktop as it is easy for you to do that with Netflix on the consumer side. You know, when you want to round trip as you walk out the door and continue to watch something. But that I think would be a place that's going to grow significantly.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that companies like Brightcove and Kaltura would have that capability, at least with the basic smart TVs and OTT devices. I know device support is something that companies like Amazon and Netflix just invest tons into because it's so device specific. Maybe that'll get better with some of the CMAP stuff that's coming, but it's a very expensive part of their.
I think it's that they aren't capable of doing it. I think technologically, that capability is there.
Yeah.
I think what it is the mentality in the enterprise video space. And in fact, we asked Michael Kolovich from Open Exchange a question about this during the keynote, and he said he went back and looked at their pre-pandemic information about their video platform. Smartphones hung around 10% then as well. So it didn't shift during the pandemic, and it surprised me, but I guess it's because enterprise sent laptops and desktops home with people, you know, but at some point, if we're going to see a post-pandemic world where people continue to work from home, you'd think those mobile devices or smart TV devices would rise in terms of that enterprise video consumption at least. So.
Okay, so pandemic is, knock on wood, at least in the United States, almost over. And you're going to do this report again in 6 months. What radical changes do you think you'll be reporting in 6 months?
Whew, goodness. What do you, from a school standpoint, I mean, especially given the fact that you're a teacher, everybody wanted to return to normal, which means in the classroom. But do you think that there will be a sort of continued education push toward using interactive video?
I think so, because the door's already opened.
Okay.
I think because it's already been opened and you got a lot more kids who everything from doing different kind of online programs now that's more available because they had to be at the time. You've got, with even like, teachers having to take like certain leaves of absences or, and to have stuff already set up to be able to record and have that already, lessons ready for maybe like a couple of days that you have to be out or whatnot. To me, that stuff's been put in place now to where it's a lot easily available.
And it may be that specialized classes that you couldn't say take at your high school, you could take remotely as well. Jan, I do think education will continue to rise in importance from that standpoint. General business, I think what we're going to see is a shift back, an attempted shift back to normal by companies, with employees saying, yeah, no, I really don't want to go back to that. I sort of like what I'm doing now. In terms of compression, and I know that's one of the things that you focus on a lot. It'll be interesting to see if AV1 and HEVC finally get the legs that everybody hopes that they'll get. What we're seeing across the board, at least right now in some of the other surveys, is H.264 continues to be, the dominant approach. AV1 hardware support, I suspect we'll see that in the next 6 months fairly definitively. The big question, I think, in the consumer space is what will the next push be for CE? So the CESs of the world, there was the push for 3D TV a couple of years ago that sort of fizzled, and there's been the push for 4K that's done well, and we're seeing some content delivered in 4K. 5G, I think, frankly, is overhyped. I think it'll be nice for consistency in delivering higher quality content, but I already have trouble getting cell service in a number of areas, at least where we live, and so to add 5G on top of that, I think for the broad swath of the US, it's not going to provide a significant benefit. So anyway, those
I
are sort of,
agree.
those are prognostications from us.
I guess do we sell Zoom now? I mean, do you see a big trend towards face-to-face meetings that's going to really drop the production of Zoom meetings and GoToMeetings?
No, I think we'll continue to have hybrid meetings.
Yeah.
And so from that standpoint, you'll always have to have the interactive. I mean, think about big events like IBC, you know, they were going to have it in September. They swore they were going to have it in September. Now they pushed it off to December, and they're going to make you go one way through half empty halls to be able to comply with the health regulations.
Yeah.
At some point, somebody's going to go, I'm just going to broadcast from my booth for all those people who can't attend because they can't get into the Netherlands. And then, of course, what's going to be needed is interactive, because it's not just, it's one thing to put up a camera and point it at your booth and have people go, oh, that's interesting, but then they want to ask questions, and that means they have to
hands-on.
Yeah, and they want somebody to sort of be their concierge, which means interactive video would be a huge part of that. So I don't know. I don't own Zoom, so I can't say whether you want to sell or buy, but at the end of the day, the interactive systems need to get better at what they do. I'll tell you the two frustrations people consistently said in the enterprise video survey was lack of an ability to ask a question and make sure it gets answered during a live event, which drove a number of people to say, we don't do these professional webinars anymore for professional development or trade shows. We don't do those live. We just watch them later. Because the second reason was, if they didn't understand something that was being said during a live event, you can't stop the live event and ask somebody to go back and explain it again. But if you're watching it on demand, you 100% can. You can back and forth through the video. So the interactivity piece is needed for doing a live event. The on-demand piece, especially with searchable content, whether it's speech to text or what have you, is going to become a much more important part of the process.
I think that's right. Well, listen, we're out of time. Michelle, Tim, thanks for joining us today, and congratulations to you too. Lots happened since the pandemic started for you two. So, and we'll hopefully talk to you again when the new reports come out.
So we're hoping to actually have a honeymoon by our second anniversary.
We can hope.
Talk to you.
You too. Thank you.